Are the undead living up to expectations in your campaign? Of course not, they shouldn't be. But we will find out how to make them work more effectively for you. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, bringing you another quick tips for DMs episode today, this time talking about the undead. The undead are just such a popular phenomena. They're a great creature type to use in your campaigns. There's just something that's deeply evocative of that sensation of fear or unease, and also just the thrills that you get from finally putting them back down to rest in the ground where they should be, or utilizing them, just the sheer unbridled terror you're unable to unleash when you bring them all up and send them forth out in decimating horrific waves of putrid flesh and terror at your enemies. Certainly it's a great time for your players and for you when you use these things, but I do believe, at least from my experiences, that in a lot of campaigns, they're underutilized in a lot of different ways, and we're going to go over some of those things, tips, tricks, and suggestions that I have for you here. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or, if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit that like button and share the video far and wide. But now let's talk about some ways that you can make your undead a bit more interesting and threatening in your games. To start with, well, they're undead. They're never really going to die, and at best, they'll eventually decay and break down to the point that they're not all that useful or dangerous anymore in a lot of situations. But there's plenty of spells and magics and different scenarios that have been provided that say that the dark magics animating them help to keep them together, help to keep them from fully putrefying, so that way they stay in a constant state of decay without ever fully breaking down. But what can be interesting is if you do play around with the aging mechanics for different things. I say mechanics, but really let time take its effect, take its hold, because, well, a body that's saturated in those kinds of dark energies for a long time, something that's managed to survive for so long, I would at least make an argument that on occasion, maybe not all the time, but on occasion, they advance, they develop, they change into something else. For a zombie apocalypse campaign setting that I recommended however many years ago for D20 Modern, one of the zombie types that I threw in there, I nicknamed the Speed Freak. The idea is that somebody died with drugs in their system that when they came back and reanimated, they were a fast zombie, they're a runner zombie, they're twitchy and jerky kind of zombie that kept constantly running and basically breaking the bones and flesh of their feet and their hands down to hard, sharpened ridges, claws, and blades, to the point that they got to be really, really dangerous. They couldn't grab you anymore. They couldn't really necessarily grapple, but they could stab and puncture with those horrific, ragged limbs. So doing little things like that, just with the day-to-day physics of existence, can do some interesting things to your creatures, or at least opens up avenues for you to homebrew some things. But if you're not even really interested in homebrewing, an easy way for you to make great use of undead is to, well, I like doing sieges. I always like doing sieges with coastal towns, villages, or cities with some kind of settlement that has walls that can be attacked and besieged, something that's still got a port to allow ships in. Because then you throw in the aquatic portion of everything, and sure, more often than not, vampires, one of the more terrifying kinds of undead, can't go across water. But zombies and skeletons and various other kinds of undead still can. And you know what else? There's all kinds of awesome sea creatures that can be turned into undead as well. And one of my favorites is whales. Why? It's an undead submersible. An undead submersible that can be hollowed out to a larger degree, keep the larger overall frame intact, but then be packed with loads of zombies, skeletons, other creatures. So these things can swim out, disgorge, and unload these creatures onto or near a ship, and then they can also be used to ram into ships and just cause everything to sink. And as their crew disgorges out, they can grab all the sailors, the soldiers, any reinforcements that were heading into town, grab a hold of them and drag them down into the murky depths, and then be brought back up and raised again, thereby adding into the undead hordes and legions. And you can do this with any number of other creatures too. I mean, you have dolphins, you have different kinds of octopi and squids, all of these wonderful creatures that are terrifying enough in and of themselves, but then you add the fact that they're undead to the mix, and, well, undead never have to sleep, never tire, never really eat, except for certain exceptions, vampires, ghouls, and the like. Ghouls are another one that are really fun, and if you're playing a more modern setting kind of game, or if you're playing D20 Modern, or anything that includes ghouls with the rules or mechanics that any living humanoid being that they kill becomes another ghoul down the line, these kinds of monsters work really well. These specific kinds of undead that multiply through their victims can really become a massive problem. I mean, not to get into socioeconomic political issues so much necessarily, but take how homeless are treated, how ignored they are, how vulnerable they're left to just everything at large in modern day society. Well, ghouls would, being scavengers and creatures of predators of opportunity that they are, the undead would look at the homeless populace and think that's a mighty fine and inviting target there. Think of how swiftly they could multiply in those situations. I mean, if you were to take New York, LA, any of these major metropolitan areas with a lot of sewers and interconnected underground systems, the way they could move through these different systems and then prey upon people at night and then bring them back down and have them reanimate, that's an army that could multiply really damn fast and get wildly out of control, especially considering that ghouls are an intelligent undead creature, so they're able to move and function. They can use firearms, they can use knives and the like, all of these different options and tools that are available to them. It really makes for a lot of fun and takes a creature that your players might readily and rapidly underestimate and then soon realize, oh no, this is getting out of hand real fast, because they might be able to deal with a ghoul, but a ghoul with an Uzi, a ghoul with a Remington, holy crap, that's a whole nother story right there. Or heck, even if you're sticking strictly within the realms of fantasy, because they're intelligent, you give a ghoul a shortbow, or make it a wizard, or a cleric. All of these other options can really do a lot to make these creatures that much more interesting and that much more challenging. Now, you're not going to do this with every single ghoul, but every now and then throwing them in there, throwing in those character levels to mix things up a bit, can really add to the tension and to the challenge for the players. Because, I mean, heck, what if an adventurer gets turned into a ghoul? I would argue that ghoul could retain at least its hit dice, if not the character levels, and really present a fun and unique challenge. Whereas more often than not, a lot of times you see the undead, they're mostly at their baseline stats. Ghouls, zombies, skeletons, vampires and mummies are usually the ones that get the more interesting features, these larger, more character-ish kind of oriented undead. But there's lots you can do and lots of ways to play with them to make them that much more interesting, and I'll have some more examples for you next week. For now, we're going to leave things off here, though. I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And remember, if you enjoyed today's video, go on down there, hit the like button, or hell, even if you didn't like it, hit dislike and go down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. What are some ways you've played with undead in your campaigns? How have you changed them up to make things more interesting? Leave your thoughts and comments down below and we'll engage in discussion. And remember to hit that subscribe button and share the video as well. But once again, I've been your host. Thank you all so much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.